Hey everybody, Garcia here, and today we're going on a fantasy adventure, or possibly just dueling with another player, in Aventuria, adventure card game. So yes, this game has two modes of play. It has duel mode, in which the players can fight against each other using their characters and the character decks. And then there is adventure mode, in which the players are working together to go through an adventure. This very throwback 80s and 90s style adventure in which you read a little story, make a few checks with some D20s, and then usually culminating in a big fight, in which you are then using your deck, as you would in the duel mode, to fight the monsters, bring out new weapons, new abilities, magical enchantments, and try to win. So let's go ahead and take a look at what comes in here. I'm going to give you an overview, and then I'll see you on the other side for some final thoughts. First, I'm going to be talking about the adventure mode in Aventuria, and then at the end, I'm going to briefly mention how the duel mode works, in which one player can go up against another one, or you can even have multiplayer matchups. But this mode here, Adventure, is going to be a cooperative mode in which the players go through an adventure together, having encounters, making checks, and then usually culminating in a big battle, okay? So in this book, in the core box, you're going to have 3 adventures. 2 of them are what's called short adventures, and then you have a regular adventure made up of 3 acts, so 3 chapters, if you would. Each one of those is about the length and involvement of a short adventure, all right? So we have here in front of us 2 players set up. Each player is going to have a character. So we have here this dwarf character. That character has a few stats on the card, such as their melee attack, their ranged attack, magic if able, some text there. They have over here a card that's only used in adventure mode. This will not be used in duel mode. That shows some of their stats in a variety of different types of checks they might need to make. So for example, craft, knowledge, perception, things like that, okay? This is going to track your health, and then you have an adventure deck. This is your character's deck made up of 30 cards. You're also each going to need a D6 and a D20. There's these fate tokens in the table, on the table, 2 per player there. And then you've got these. So for whenever you need to select a random character, you can turn them face down and shuffle them, all right? This is a star player token right here. So here's how the adventure flows generally. You will turn to an adventure. In this case, this is the first one, Saving Sylvana, right here. You are going to collectively read that adventure, and it'll explain what's going on. It's very straightforward but pretty flavorful fantasy setting, and they explain what's going on. And then every now and then they give you a check that looks like this. So for example, this one over here says that every hero has to make a body control check. That means we are each going to check our body control stat, which is the top one there. This character has a 10. This character also has a 10. But for example, this one's craft is 14. So a 10. That means we're going to roll the die, the D20, and try to roll 10 or under. You are more likely to succeed, therefore, if your stat is higher. Make sense? So we roll for this character. This character gets a 4, and this player will roll, and they get a 12. So this character gets a successful roll. This is a failure, and then we check here. For success, that character will read this. Failure will read that. Critical success would be rolling a 1. Critical failure rolling a 20. And then we keep going. And this will all culminate in a battle where they tell you, okay, set up a fight. And at the end of that, if you succeed, then you have won this adventure. If you do not, well, you can try again. All right? And that's going to be it for a short adventure. If it's a normal adventure, then you do something in between. You have a short respite. And then you go into Act 2, which again follows a very similar format. So let me show you how the fight would go, and then that'll give you a good idea of what's going on in the adventure overall. Once the scenario is done telling you how to set up, you might be looking at something like this. So we've got this board out here. We have a main baddie, some henchmen we have to take out. And then this card over here, which is the time scale, with a number of tokens based on the difficulty you choose to play at. And they are going to be counting down and basically affecting you in negative ways the longer you take in the story here, in the fight. So here's how the fight is going to work out. The players are going to each simultaneously ready their cards. They are going to draw a couple of cards. They are going to then be allowed to add some endurance to their display. Then they are going to take turns starting from the start player, taking as many actions as they want to. Then the other player will do that, take as many actions as they want to. And once that's done, then we are going to resolve all of the baddies taking their own actions. Once that's all done, we remove a time token, see if anything triggered, and back to the top with the players, okay? So let's take it from the top. So each player is going to, from their shuffled deck of cards, draw 5 cards. You can mulligan some of those away, so discard some, draw back up to 5, and then shuffle the ones you put aside back into the deck. Once that's done, each player then has the opportunity to place none, 1, or 2 of these face down in front of them to count as endurance. That's basically your spending power, okay? So these cards are going to come in a variety of different types, but for example, we have here an axe, okay? This axe is going to cost us 5 endurance. It is going to provide an attack. It's a melee attack, it says down here. It's a heavy weapon. And then it tells you how it works. And I'll show you a combat and how it plays out in just 1 second. This is going to be armor for the chest. It lets you know that you can exhaust this card and offer yourself protection for, and then an effect as well. It's quite expensive at 6. And then we've got some that are going to have this red frame, which are basically one-shot abilities. If the number up here is in white with a black circle, that also means it's a free action. It'll remind you down here, and that means you can play it on your turn or outside of that turn. So that's the general thing you'll see. Abilities, you can have cards you can play to boost yourself, attachments, all sorts of things. So you pick a couple of these if you want to. Again, none, 1, or 2, and place them face down. And then, once both players have done that, then I can exhaust these to take actions. Now, the characters have a built-in attack. And I'm going to go ahead and use that built-in attack right now to show you how it works. It says right here that this is a basic equipment knife attack. And it explains below that it is going to cost me 1 endurance. I am then going to exhaust this card, and I will make a melee attack. And after that shows 1d6 and a symbol for damage. So how does that work? Well, I spend 1. I'm going to exhaust my dwarf, and I am going to make a melee attack. Now, my melee stat, my card says, is 14. He's quite a good brawler. And I am going to select a target. So here is the main baddie who happens to not be vulnerable right now. I cannot target them. And then I have these. So I'm going to target this orc archer right here. I'm going to make an attack with my d20. And again, I am trying to roll 14, because that's my stat, or under. I will roll that. I got a 4, so I hit. Now I have to decide how much I hit. I'm going to roll 1d6, because that's what the basic knife attack says it is. If instead I had just rolled with that axe I showed you, it's still a melee attack, but then the damage if I hit would be 1d6 plus 5. So I roll the d6, add 5 to it, right? All right, so here we go. I'm going to roll this, and it's only 1, unfortunately. Now, we check here the stats. They have 15 health. There's a stat for avoiding damage, which they don't have one. But then they do have armor. And the armor says 1 on it. That means they shrug off 1 hit. If instead I had rolled 3, they would shrug off 1 hit and take 2. In which case I would remove the 5, give them 3 more, and then they are now at 13 health. Alright? And that's how that works. So once I'm done taking actions, I can only ever do 1 melee attack, 1 ranged attack, 1 magic attack at most, even if I have multiple weapons that can do the same kind of attack. This player will take actions, and then it'll go to the baddies out here. And they're each going to take actions. It denotes at the very bottom in the stats here how many actions they get. All these henchmen have one. The main baddie over here, this kobold, has as many actions as there are players. So let's do this one. Let's assume we already did the 2 over here, and you do them left to right. So let's assume we did that already. Let's take a look at this one. They have 1 action. We're going to roll a d20 for that. And it shows you 5. Then we check the card. At 5, it says it's a ranged attack. The starting hero suffers 1d6 plus 2. So it lets you know what happened. It's an automatic pass, okay? They don't have to check on a die. We did that already to denote what they did. And now they do 1d6 plus 2 damage. Fine, the starting hero is still my dwarf. 1d6 plus 2 would be a total of 3 plus 2, which is 5. But before I take that damage, I can try to evade that damage. To do so, I roll a d20, and I check my evade symbol right here, which is a 5. I have to roll a 5 or lower. It's very hard, but if I do it, which I did not, I rolled a 10. If I had done it, I half the amount of damage I would take. So instead of 5, I would take 2.5. It rounds up. I would only take 3 damage. And I would track that right over here with these 2 cards, okay? So there we go. I take my 5 damage, in which I can arrange these 2 cards from showing 40 to showing 35, like so. And then we move on to the next one, because this one only has 1 activation. Once everybody has activated, then we go over here, we remove a time token, check if the card says anything, and we go back to the beginning like I said. This continues until the players are both knocked out, or we achieve some sort of positive ending, as it says in the book. So in this case, I'd need to wipe everybody out. And then I win. And then we read the resolution to the story, okay? So there you go. That's how that's going to work. And that's the general flow, again, for the stories, for the adventures. Sometimes events will come into play, more henchmen will be added, hence we have a henchman deck here, or a variety of other things might happen based on the story. But it's generally very straightforward. Read through some story, some developments, make some checks based on what you are attempting to overcome, and then wrap that up when they tell you to with a fight with some sort of big baddie and their henchmen. So, hopefully that gives you enough of an idea to understand how the adventure mode works. Again, I'm not diving too deeply into the characters and their deck composition or anything like that. Just know that some characters are better at some things than other things, of course, and that they have their own deck. There is some deck building at the end of the story when you get reward cards. You could, add them into your deck and remove another card and do a little deck building. But that's basically how the adventuring part of this works. Now, briefly, the dueling, which is actually where they tell you to begin, so that you understand how playing your part of this game works, okay? What the players are doing out here. For dueling, you ignore all of this, all right? So none of this would be part of the setup, and you do not need this card either with the different stats. The players are simply shuffling up their deck. They're setting their health to their starting health of 40, and they're going to take turns back and forth bringing out endurance, so laying endurance face down, spending that endurance, attacking each other, using abilities to bring each other down to 0, and ultimately, of course, if you do that, you win the game, okay? So that's basically it. It's a pretty straightforward system that these two are working with. You basically saw the most in-depth part, which is how that combat resolution happens, all right? Now, these tokens here, you're going to get one in adventure mode when you knock out someone, and you can spend it for a reroll. So this can be given back and have, I believe it is someone else on your party, you can spend this for them to have a reroll on one of their skill checks. In duel mode, then they have a couple more uses. You can spend it for a reroll, but you can also spend it and draw a couple of cards and things like that. All right. So there you go. Hopefully that is enough for you to have an appreciation of how Aventuria here works. Let's go ahead and go back up top. Let me tell you what I think of it. That is Aventuria adventure card game in the Dark Eye universe here. This is, if I'm not mistaken, basically a role-playing world, okay? So, I am not normally a big fan of what I call generic fantasy, right? This sort of setting in which you've got elves and dwarves and orcs and that sort of thing. I don't tend to like them. But a lot of the time, that setting and these games are couched in complexity. They overcome those settings and enhance those settings, I suppose, with a lot of complexity, a lot of minutia, a lot of stats, and a lot of things you can tweak for a very in-depth experience. I find that those settings and those kinds of games, that combination, doesn't really do it for me. But nostalgia, I think, is a very powerful weapon and very powerful tool, and that's where this game shines. I think this theme is charming, it is old school, it gives you the fuzzies if you are at all, interested or familiar with these old role-playing campaigns. And if you're bringing to the table then old sessions you played when you were younger, perhaps, if you were into D&D or, any role-playing game, then I think you're going to enjoy the way this unfolds. It's not really a role-playing game. This is a card game, but the story it gives you the feeling, the flavor of a role-playing game, right? There is no role-playing. You are not really making those kinds of decisions. You are just given a check every now and then you fight. But it does a good job of being so, streamlined in its setting that it enhances that feeling if you're bringing something to it. The aesthetics here, I think, are excellent. I think the card quality is fantastic. All the cards are lit and finished. They are very well illustrated. They use shorthand throughout the cards in a not overwhelming manner. I think a lot of games sometimes get bogged down by abbreviations and sort of, making up terms and whatnot. This one doesn't do that. Again, adding to the simplicity, to the accessibility of this package. So I like that very much. Now, the card-based life tracking is annoying. They, I know, sell expansions for this, and they have these, wheels you can use to track your life. Much better. But the cards, I just always find that annoying when you slide two cards on top of one another to track that you have 27 life or whatever. All right, replay value is the first place where this game falters a little bit. The adventure part of this game is my favorite part, okay? Let's start there. I think the dueling mode is interesting, but it's also very samey to, just about every collectible card game I can think of. Certainly Magic the Gathering, but many others. The adventure part, therefore, is where I find that engaging, fun, adventuring party feel shines through. But there's not a lot of content in this box. You got the big adventure, right? And then you've got two one-shot adventures. So that's a problem with the replayability out of the box. There's very little content in this core box, is what I'm saying, all right? If you get into the duel mode, that's a little bit better. If you don't, then it's a little bit worse. Okay, game arc. The RPG part, like I said, is really quite light. And the combat sometimes tends to draw out. You are kind of ready for the fight to be over before it's over. That's not atypical when you think of what a role-playing session feels like, but it undermines the fact that this game is supposed to be read through some story, roll a couple dice, and then fight, and then you're done. That fight part at the end sometimes can draw out. But it's good fun, like I said, if you are used to role-playing games and you want something that approximates that in a card game. The ease of play, the bright point, I would say here, is the ease of play. Again, these games can be daunting sometimes. You know, big fantasy epic game and you look at the character sheet and it has 28 stats and 3 trackers and you go, oof, okay. I mean, very realistic, I suppose, and, I'm putting that in air quotes, right? Very immersive, a lot of minutia. You can make yourself quite unique. But also, you lose the flavor and the silliness and the storytelling and the gathering around the table, telling each other a tale or just reading one in a shared manner. And I think that's where this shines. If you want to visit a little fantasy world, read a little bit about some crazy goblin doing something wacky and then go in there and draw your sword and have at it, then this does that without getting in your way to allow you to have that experience. Ease of play here is beautiful. Lastly, tactics, luck, strategy. There's plenty of luck. But with that come really fun and interesting highs and lows. And that's why I don't think it's a problem in this game. There's certainly tactics, and you should strategize as to what you intend to do. We're going to attack this character first, take them off the table, so that we can focus over here. Oh, this guy heals these two, so let's wipe them out first. That sort of thing. And then tactics as to what card I give myself. I need this weapon. I'm going to make these 2 cards endurance because I don't need them. I should save this one so I can play it later. I've got a card here that's going to help you out. That sort of thing. And then luck. A ton of luck. But, as I said, the highs and lows make for such dramatic events, such, stand-up moments, right? You've got, as I wrote here, failing to hit that goblin yet again is made up for when you smash an orc for 12 damage. And so that's just, you swing your warhammer and boom, you roll these dice, you go 12. That's incredibly fun and exciting and makes for a good laugh. So that's how I feel about it. Now, again, as you can tell, there are issues with this, especially as I'm reviewing it right now, this core box. There's a lot of extra content out there. I could be reviewing that in the future, but I'm talking about this box. There's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of fun here. I think the key is you have to know what you want from this. If you want something that feels old school, is not necessarily about innovation, but is about visitation of the past. That was a little bit of a gag there, I guess, but you understand what I'm saying. Then I think you're going to have yourself a good time with this one, okay? If not, if you're looking for the latest hotness, mechanically innovative game, this is not that kind of game. So overall, this is going to get a 7 out of 10 from me because I had a good time with it. That means it's going to get a seal of approval. And like I said, if you do get into it, there's a bunch of expansions, characters, more adventures, all of that stuff. I do wish there was more. There were more adventures in the core box, but alas, I guess if you really get into it, this has to be a jumping on point. So you've got to deal with that. All right. So there it is, everybody. Aventuria Adventure card game. Thanks for checking this out with me. I'll see you on the next one.